Audrey Marie Hilley is a murderer who killed by poison to collect insurance money. She has one known victim on May 25th, 1975, by killing her husband Frank Hilley in Anniston, Alabama. She was sentenced to life in prison for her um for her husband's murder in 20 years for attempting to kill her daughter in June 1983. She escaped on February 19, 1987, and died from hypothermia on February 26, 1987. Her life and her life history are subjects to many um, films, such as the 1991 Wife, Murder, and Murderer. And the movie also stars Judith Light in the title role with Whip Herbley and David Alden. Welcome back to the True Crime Lounge podcast. I do have a merch shop for all your true crime gear. I also have a Patreon that you can join for early access to episodes scheduled to come out. For any updates on my channel or podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode. Today we're going to be talking about Audrey Marie Frazier. This is episode 9 of our Alabama Murder series. Season 4, before I dive into this, I do have some announcements. I do have a sister podcast. I have created a new podcast. It's called Dark Academia Queen. And you're probably wondering, why has this girl created yet another podcast that she sucks at? But here's the simple reason. I love it. I love podcasts. Your opinion? Oh well. But I do love true crime, and it's something I deeply enjoy, and I also love dark academia. So it conveniently works out for me. Now, I recently discovered a case that I plan on doing in the future, which you can go look up some of the summary of it as I talk about it on my Dark Academia podcast. But she was born Audrey Marie Frazier on June 4th, 1933, to Huey and Lucille Frazier and Mary Frank Hilley in May 1951. In May 1975, Frank Hilley visited the hospital complaining about nausea and tenderness in the abdomen. He was diagnosed with a viral stomachache, and the condition persisted, and he was admitted to the hospital for tests, and that indicated liver malfunctions. Physicians then diagnosed infectious hepatitis, and he died early in the morning of May 25th, 1975. An autopsy was done with Audrey's permission, and it revealed hepatitis, swelling of the kidneys and lungs, bilateral pneumonia, and inflammation of the stomach. Because the symptoms closely resembled those of hepatitis, no test for poison was conducted, and the cause of death was listed as infectious hepatitis. Frank Hilley has maintained a moderate life insurance. Now, his widow redeemed for $31,140. Slightly over 3 years later, she took out a $25,000 life insurance policy on her daughter, Carol. A $25,000 accidental death rider took effect August 1978. So, she was widowed for a few months, and Carol began to have experience. Within a few months, Carol began to have experienced trouble with nausea and was admitted to the emergency room several times. And after a year of insuring her daughter, Hilley gave her daughter an injection that would alleviate the nausea. However, the symptoms did not appear and eventually worsened. Carol began to experience numbness, and her extremities were admitted to the hospital for tests. Unable to get any diagnosis, Carol's physician brought in a psychiatrist because she feared her symptoms might be psychosomatic. Now, while she was undergoing psychiatric testing at Birmingham's Caraway Methodist Hospital, Carol received 2 more injections from her mom, who warned her that no one was to know about the shots, and Audrey explained that the shots were given by her boyfriend, who was a registered nurse. Now, a month after Carol was admitted to the hospital, her physician said she was suffering from malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies. He also added that he suspected heavy metal poisoning and was to blame for her symptoms. And that afternoon, Hilley had Carol discharged from the hospital, and the next day she was admitted to UAB. Coincidentally, she was arrested for passing bad checks, and they were written to the insurance company that insured Carol's life, causing a policy to lapse. The University Hospital, now UAB, physicians concentrated on their investigation on the possibility of heavy metal poisoning. Noting that Carol's hands and feet were numb, and she had nerve palsy, causing the foot drop, and that she lost most um, of her deep tendon reflexes. So, how did Audrey get caught? Well, ultimately, physicians discovered the aldrich mess lines that were present in her toenails and fingernails that indicated arsenic poisoning. They conducted test samples of Carol's hair and revealed that it had 50 times the normal arsenic level in human hair. What is the normal arsenic level? Interesting. But her condition was officially attributed to arsenic poisoning. Forensics test on Carol's hair, conducted October 3rd, 1979, by the the ADFS, revealed arsenic levels ranging from over 100 times the normal level of scalp of 0 for the normal level in the end of the hair shaft. This indicated that Carol had been given increasingly larger doses of arsenic over a period of 4 to 8 months. That same day, Frank Hilley's body was exhumed for testing, and the analysis revealed abnormally high levels of arsenic ranging from 10 times the normal level in hair samples and 100 times the normal levels of toenail samples. As a result of these tests, Dr. Joseph Emery of the ADFS concluded that the cause of death was acute arsenic poisoning, and that Frank Hilley suffered from chronic arsenic poisoning, meaning that he had been given arsenic for months prior to his death. She was not going to let it rest until someone. But Audrey was still incarcerated on her bad checks charges when she was arrested on October 9th, 1979, for attempted murder of her daughter. The Anniston police found another vial in her purse, and she was in possession, and subsequent testing revealed that the presence of arsenic 2 weeks later. And Frank Hilley's sister found a jar of Crowley's new and improved rat mouse poisoning, and it contained between 1.4 and 1.5% of arsenic. On November 9th, 1979, Audrey Hilley was released on bond and registered at a local motel under the name Emily Stevens. She disappeared between the 9th and the 18th of November. A note indicating that she might have been kidnapped was left behind, and a missing person report was filed, and Audrey was listed as a fugitive. So how did she escape? Well, on November 19th, there was a break-in at the home of her aunt, and a car excuse me, I don't know where that sneeze came from. I'm very sorry. But a car, some woman's clothing, and an overnight bag were missing from the house, and investigators found a note on the car reading, "Do not call the police. We will burn you if you do. We found what we wanted, and we will not bother you again." On January 11, 1980, she was indicted in absentia for her husband's murder, and investigators found that both her mom and her mother-in-law had significant but not fatal traces of arsenic in their system when they died. So, Although police and the FBI had launched a massive manhunt, she remained a fugitive for a little more than 3 years. So, what about? So you can only imagine she started a new life. Like she got new names and everything. She first traveled to Florida where she would meet John Homan, and she was using her name Robbie Hannon. And they lived together for more than a year before she married him in May of 1981 and then took his last name. They moved to New Hampshire, and she frequently talked about her imaginary twin sister, Terry, who supposedly lived in Texas. Late in the summer of 1982, she will leave New Hampshire, telling her husband that she needed to attend family business and to see doctors about an illness. During the time she traveled to Texas and Florida, she used the alias Terry Martin. And during her trip, during the trip, she called John Homan and informed him that Robbie Homan had died in Texas, but there was no need for him to come to Texas because the body had been donated to medical science. This girl is messed up. So, on November 12th or 13th, after changing her hair color and losing weight, she returned to New Hampshire and met John Homan posing as Terry Morton, his quote, deceased wife's sister. Messed up, I know. An obituary for Robbie Homan appeared in the New Hampshire newspapers, but aroused suspicion when they were unable to verify any of the information it contained. A New Hampshire state police detective surmised a woman living as Terry Martin. In fact, Robbie Homan had staged her death. That hunch paid off, and shortly the police brought, quote, Terry Martin, unquote, in for questioning. She confessed to being Audrey Marie Hilley. She was returned to Alabama to face trial, and she was quickly convicted and sentenced to life in prison for her husband's murder and 20 years for attempting to kill her daughter. Now, she began serving her sentence in 1983 and was a quiet and model prisoner. Her good behavior earned her several day passes from the prison, and she was always back on time. In February 1987, she escaped after she was given a 3-day pass to visit her husband, who had moved to Anniston to be near his wife. They spent a day at an Anniston motel, and when John left for a few hours, she disappeared, leaving him behind a note asking him for his forgiveness. Her escape prompted an inquiry into the prison system's furlough policy. And this time, she did not stay missing long. 4 days after she vanished, Anniston police responded to a call about a suspicious person. Went to the home and found her, and she apparently had been crawling in the woods, drenched by 4 days of frequent rain and numb from the temperatures dropping to the low 30s. She went to the hospital and underwent emergency treatment for hypothermia. While there, she suffered a heart failure and died. So, what happened exactly? Well, married at 18, she had been having marital problems 9 years later, and when her second daughter Carol was born, psychiatrists applied hindsight feel the birth may have somehow triggered a radical shift in her personality. Resentment of her new child simmering over time, finally surfacing into a series of lethal attacks. So when Audrey's husband Frank passed away in 1975, cancer was to blame for his death. That same diagnosis was made 2 years later, in the death of her mom, Lucille Frazier. And now, by 1979, victims have started to pile up, with her daughter Carol lingering on the brink of death for several weeks, and the doctors managed to pull her back. They were too late for her mother-in-law, Carrie Hilley, who died in November after a prolonged illness. Now, by the time that the authorities were closing the ring around Audrey, doctors had discovered abnormal levels of arsenic in Carol's blood. And on a hunch, they started checking other family members who were recently deceased. On October 25th, 1979, she was indicted for attempted murder for her daughter, plus an unrelated charge of check fraud, and 3 weeks later, free on a $14,000 bond, she vanished from a Birmingham motel. Yeah. So what exactly happened? Well, there have been many accounts, and is many accounts on this. But that is it for this episode. I will see y'all next time. Y'all have a great day. And remember, kindness matters, words matters. Know that people are still grieving and grief does not just go away like that.